皆さん、こんにちは。今日のビデオでは、私が日本語を間違った方法で勉強して1年を無駄にしたことについて話します。I wasted a year studying Japanese the wrong way. Keep watching so you can avoid making the same mistake. When I first got started with Japanese, I went looking for an app to help me get down the basics. I really had no idea what I was doing or what I was looking for, nor had I done much research on how to actually learn Japanese, and that was probably my first mistake. After doing some research, Duolingo seemed to be the most popular mobile app for learning a language, and looking at the list of languages that they covered, Japanese was included, so I decided to download it and give it a try. After a couple of weeks, I was through the basics and was making progress, but the ads were way too annoying, so I decided to pay for a full year subscription. And now that I'd paid, I was committed, so I had no choice but to keep at it. At the start, when you're learning the hiragana and the katakana, it's pretty good. The quizzes and the repetition for learning the letters really help them stick. To add, even the basic words are useful if you want to do some greetings or maybe order some food while you're in Japan on a vacation. But once I got into sentences, it kind of became a game, which is good because it keeps you motivated, but it's also bad because you come up with a strategy to solve the questions rather than understanding them. I get that part of the selling point of Duolingo is that it's a game to help you learn, but with a game, you can also come up with a way to win without necessarily doing it the right way. And no doubt, part of that is my fault. I could have tried harder to learn rather than trying to win, but unfortunately, that was how the game is designed. So it was a lot easier to get pushed towards trying to win rather than trying to do it right. At the time, the app started to introduce kanji, but there was no hiragana to help with the pronunciation. You had to listen and hope that you were getting it right. The problem has since been solved, but I know a guy who's using romaji instead of hiragana, and while it makes it easier if you haven't learned the hiragana yet, it's kind of a hindrance because in the long run, it's going to screw up your pronunciation and make learning more complicated stuff difficult later on. The whole thing though was that I got good at solving the questions, but a lot of times I had no idea what the words meant because without the spelling, I couldn't look them up in a dictionary, so I kind of had to guess what the words meant based on the translations given by the app, but it's not word for word, and there's a little bit of massaging there to make it make sense. But overall, it was hard to understand what was going on. What was I reading? What did the words mean? And how did they come together to form some chunk of meaning? The thing was, I'd paid, and it seemed like I was making progress, in the app at least, but after a year, I couldn't say anything in Japanese. I didn't know many words, and my true progress seemed to be quite minimal. My wife even asked me, "What have you been studying for the last year?" At the time, a friend told me he was making great progress with Duolingo and the Spanish program, but that seemed to be different because he could read the words more or less, as they were similar enough to English, and the general structure of the grammar was basically the same. It was just a matter of swapping words between languages. But as my subscription came to an end, I decided to cancel it because it had been and was going to continue to be a waste of my time. I also decided that I was going to listen to my friend who was also learning Japanese at the time, and he kept talking about this thing called Anki, so I decided to look it up. After downloading it and figuring out how to set it up, that was probably the hardest part. I hit a few bumps along the road, but then I was hooked, and I have since been able to keep a year-long streak without missing a day. After using Anki for almost a year and learning almost 2,000 words, I downloaded Busuu, as it seemed similar to Duolingo, though maybe it's not as repetitive or as long or intensive a program. The first thing I did was the assessment, and that skipped me ahead past the basics. After that, I used the app every day for almost 20 to 30 minutes and was able to finish the whole course in around a month. I'd say that because of my practice with Anki and learning enough words to be able to understand what was showing up with the app questions and example sentences, the tasks and the questions were a lot easier to understand, and I could actually learn something from the app. Even with the kanji learning lessons, I already knew many of them, so it was just a matter of learning the stroke order and maybe the different pronunciations and possibly some word combinations, which again, I already knew some of those. What I took away after the short experiment was that if I had tried Duolingo at this point, it would have been way better because I'd already have the foundation of the words and the kanji being used. The biggest problem here, and this is not specific to Duolingo, but learning Japanese in general, is that Japanese, in particular the kanji, are so different from English that it takes a serious effort to just pick up some basic words, which you kind of need to do before you can get started learning how to use them in sentences and understanding grammar in books. Put another way, if you don't know how to read what's showing up in the app, there's little point in trying to learn the grammar or anything else. My main takeaway after all of this is that you need to learn some basic vocabulary with something like Anki before you can start trying to understand grammar and sentences and more complicated learning material. Duolingo is fine to use, but you've got to remember some words first. But this is the same with trying to read Japanese manga. If you don't know at least some of the words, then you're going to spend all your time looking up all the new words in kanji that you don't recognize and then not make any progress with the story. I believe that learning vocabulary is a foundation to learning Japanese, so spend some time doing that before you jump into more complicated stuff like reading or grammar practice with the Japanese learning app. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about Duolingo or Anki in the comments below. If you found this useful, click the like button and subscribe for more content like this.